Greetings, Pilgrims. Welcome to another episode of the Polygon Pilgrimage, and today I've got something pretty cool for you. We are making some ancient maps, kind of like you see characters in like the Lord of the Rings and that sort of thing would use. So these are made of leather, they have tattered edges, we've got the land masses here, we've got the coastlines, we've got a compass rose, we've got the names of the cities, we got some mountain ranges, and I experimented a little bit with some rivers and things in here. So this is 100% procedural. We've got everything going on here. And I say that, yes, it's procedural. It's all done via the nodes. But yes, I've hand-tweaked the positions of things. But the idea is that you can go back, and you could change something, and it would have a massive effect throughout the whole thing. All that node-based architecture is amazing. So for this, my main challenges were I had a request to create a map. So this is what we have here. Let's drop this guy back down into 3D view here so we can... performance-wise, it'll be a little bit better. So the main challenge here was to create this map, and I wanted to create things like the coastlines, I wanted to create the mountain ranges, and I really wanted to experiment with creating these folds in the paper. So if you fold a piece of paper like I did, I took a physical piece of paper and I folded it in order to figure out where the ups and downs and things were with the various folds. And so from that, we have this really super realistic looking thing. I'm very happy with it. Is it perfect? No. But it's really good. And if you just put this on a flat plane, on a texture, on your world, there you go. You have a map. And you can change everything in here. So we're going to step through the whole thing. So let's start with the Mainland Shape, and then we'll work our way through. So yeah, let's start over here. So for the Mainland Shape, so obviously this is a trick that I've done before with my world generator. But what we're looking at here are some clouds. Histogram scanning them and then blending and subtracting basically. So we start with our clouds, and here I have no change. This is just the default clouds too. I'm running through a histogram scan, and I'm going to put the position at 0.26, contrast all the way up. So this gives us some pretty cool, these look like cool continents, right? We're already getting there. So transform, I'm going to move it around, scale it around, move it a bit. I'm just looking for some interesting shapes, and the important thing to note here is we're looking for interesting shapes that we can sort of bring this invisible line down here and over this way and up this way to kind of crop just that center. We're trying to isolate like a center Pangea-like mass, okay? So if we go over here to the blend, you'll notice I started to do that. So the left for the cropping here is 0.04, right is 0.94, top is 0.21, and the bottom is 1. And I'm starting to crop in, and you'll see that I'm removing some of these edge pieces. I'm trying to just get closer and closer to just the center. All right. So then take another clouds 2, and this time I'm going to put the random seed at 2. I'm going to do the exact same thing here, but I'll put this at 0.29 and the contrast of 1. And then when I blend those two together with a subtractive nature, you'll notice, look what we're getting now. So I'm just kind of randomizing the shapes of these things a little bit by doing the seed value at the beginning, and then a little bit different on the histogram scan. And by taking one shape and subtracting it from another, we get this. Now this is looking a lot better. We're getting closer to more of what we're looking for, okay? So then I'm going to take that same one and another histogram scan here, but only at 0.16 this time. So we're getting more islands, more, I think they're called archipelagos, I'm not quite sure, but, islands that are all broken up and kind of spread out, almost Hawaii-like, So then transform, let's move these guys around. Transform, we'll move another copy and scale down another copy of that. And by blending this first one with our other one, so you see we start with this, and let's do another subtract. Let's start to cut out from our island here. We can really start to kind of shape the land a bit. Transform, let's move around, scale it, and this kind of becomes the majority of our final island here, our final landmass here. Then we're going to combine it with this second one that we did here. So just a couple different variations combined in various ways, and these are all set to max lighten, by the way, so that way we have all the white values pushed all the way up. That's all we're looking at right now is white and black, okay? So then down here, I'm like, all right, let's try something different. So this is a clouds 2 with random seed all the way up to 9, and then a histogram scan of 0.15, contrast of 1, and then I'm going to transform and move this, and because it tiles, we're going to move it now. I've kind of isolated this landmass, and this is a perfect candidate for what I was talking about. So now, if I go ahead and start to crop this in, you'll notice I can crop in a little bit, start to get rid of some of the other land masses, and I thought, this is good. Now we have a landmass here, one here, and some little islands. Perfect. Combine that with the rest, and there you go. And to be honest, it's kind of world-like, almost Earth-like. We've got some large continents with a big mass on the back here that looks almost like Europe and Asia, and then down here we've got, something kind of India-like, and then down here we've got, an island off to its side, even though this is closer to the shape of what Australia is, but we have this off by itself. And then this reminds me almost of like London, England. You got the little island off the corner there. So it, gives us a little bit of a sense of realism. So that's really cool. Okay, so then here I'm cropping off just a little bit more, kind of centering off. I wanted to get very rectangular because my paper here is rectangular. Okay, now we need to build up our coastlines. So you'll notice that we have 3 lines here. We have this line, which goes around. This is our thickest line. This is the actual, shape of the land. Then we have these 2 other lines, which are the coastline coming off, and that really helps to make it look more like it's actually, showing water depth and depth of land as it goes off into the ocean. So to do that, we're going to take this guy and we're going to use him a lot. Okay, so this is let's call this our core shape. So we're going to take our core shape here and we're going to throw this into an edge detect. And I'll read off my settings to you so that you can follow along exactly. So you just make a core shape for yourself. You follow along with these settings. Okay, so our edge width here is 1.75. Edge roundness is 0. And tolerance is 0. So that gives us this. All right, and then I'm going to do it a second time. I'm going to copy paste that. And you notice we go from 1.75 to 2. So if I go back and forth here, you can look at that. It got just a little bit bigger. Now, for each of these, we're going to do a color to mask. And I'm going to choose black. And you'll see what we're getting here. Now we have white instead of black. I guess we could have done an invert as well. That would have worked because we're doing black and white, but old habits die hard. Okay, so now we're going to blend, and I'm going to do a subtract, and this is what that gives me. Now this is cool and this works, except we don't want these inner lines. I don't care about all these lines, and it's really kind of messing up my vibe here. But if you look at the outer edges here, this is what we're looking for, the outer landmass, and then a line that goes off the coast. That's perfect. Okay, so that's really good. So what we're going to do here is, then we're going to do an invert grayscale. So now we want to get just these lines. And then if I go here and do a blend, notice what we're doing here. And add linear dodge, okay? And I'm adding, what am I blending with? Our original shape here. So I'm cutting out almost that shape out of our 2 sets of lines here. So now I'm only getting that outermost set of lines. Perfect. So now if we put that on top of what we want, we're going to get exactly what we want. But again, we have black lines here. We need white lines. So there we go. We do an invert grayscale. So we do all of that a second time. So here, I'm going to go up to 2.5 and then 2.75. So notice the difference in numbers here is not that great. You want a very close amount of difference. So this is 1.75 to 2. So that only goes up by 0.25. So then here, 2.5. 2.75, okay? So again, a difference of 0.25. So we do the same thing here. I'm going to get the white. I'm going to do the subtract. We're going to invert it. We're going to blend it with, and here I'm going to blend this guy with our original shape again up here because we're cutting out all of those interior shapes, okay? So we're cutting out all of the interior shapes, and then here we're going to do an invert grayscale and we get our lines again. So now if we scoot over here real quick, let's scoot over here and let's follow this line. He comes all the way to here. Let's see, this line goes way over there. Okay, here we go. Follow along right there. Okay, so we're going to start putting down our, we'll come back to the other colors in a second. I just want to show you where this goes. So when we come all the way over here, this guy, we're going to start laying down our lines. And notice we're on a multiply of 0.5 with a color. Okay, and then we start to put down our second line. Look at that. Our second line ends up right there. And our third line ends up just on top of that. So perfect. Those coastal lines came out just right. Okay, so let's go back. Let's go back. So this is all done. So all of our mainland shape, okay? So we have our mainland. So now let's worry about the actual paper itself, okay? Because we need the paper edges to look right and all that. And don't worry about this weird that you see here. This is because it's a cube. And I'm doing some pretty heavy height distortion in order to take a look at how it's going to behave later on. So that'll work. Okay, so over here, let's take a look at our map shape, in our imperfections and all that. Okay, so for our map shape, we're going to start with just a shape node and with a square, 0.95 and 0.65 for the X and Y. That gives us this kind of rectangular-ish look to it. So now we need to start chipping away at it, okay? So we're going to come back to right here because we need to go over here and do all the chipping. So this is the map edge damage. This is all of this stuff around the edge. So we're going to start with the clouds 2 again. And for efficiency's sake, you can borrow from above too. I've just, out of habit, I make a copy because I'm kind of experimenting with each little section. So clouds 2, histogram scan to kind of get this kind of thing. So 0.21, we're getting just some severe white and black, okay? Then I'm going to throw it into a shape mapper. Shape mapper node comes to the rescue once again. This is an awesome node. Now, shape mapper, we're going to set our shape to polygon and our amount to 8, our segments to 4, radius of 0.86, and a width of 0.6. And you'll notice what that's doing here. It's kind of weirdly shaping these things all around these edges. That's fine. We don't care. We're going to throw this into a transform, and I'm just going to scale it down on the top and bottom so that I get a more rectangular shape. Gee, I wonder why. So now, let's throw this into a warp because we don't want perfect harsh edges. Intensity of 2.18, and I'm going to bring another clouds 2 with a random seed of 5 into the mix to power that, okay? There we go. So now, down here, let's take that same clouds, another histogram scan. This time, we're doing 0.09 and 0.74 on the contrast. It's very, very, very light. We're just kind of getting a few little marks here and there. Transform to kind of move it around. Shape mapper, let's get just some edges going on here. So this is a polygon 3 for the pattern amount, segments of 4, radius of 0.86, and width of 0.6. And I am going to turn on the flip 1 on 2. So that means that every other one gets sort of inverted. And so just for a little bit more variety. Transform again to kind of scale that down to make sure that it's going to clip with our edges. And then warp it as well, 1.29, pardon me. And we're powering that from the original one up here. So that way we have 2 different seeds. And by cross-pollinating these seed values, we get even more variation out of just a fewer number of nodes in total. Okay, so then let's blend the 2 together and we get this kind of look to it. Now if we come up here, we take this shape, I'm going to do subtract. You can see here it's chipping away at the edges quite nicely. I didn't want a whole lot of damage, just enough to show that it's been used a lot and that these edges are getting kind of messed up over the years. Now, let's throw this into a warp 0.75. Again, we're going to come all the way down here and use this second clouds 2 to power us. And that warp gives us our final kind of page shape. There you go. Really cool. Now, I would like to find a way to come in here and kind of clean up things like this, which you could do. You could put a shape in there and all that. But that's more specific to this particular set of things. I was trying to find a way to do it so that you just can change some numbers and it just mixes it all up. Okay, so while we're working on the page here, let's talk about the outer edge gradient. So one of the things I did was I made it so it's more highlighted in the middle. And this is a stylistic thing. This is not realistic to the way that these old leather maps were created, but I just think it was really cool. So a gradient linear 2, and no change whatsoever to this guy. A levels here, and I kind of blew it out a bit so that it's more of a gray to white rather than a white to black. Then I'm going to blend that with a copy of itself rotated 90 degrees. And we're on a 0.96 on the opacity with a multiply. That just gives us a nice highlight in the center and it fades off. And then when we blend the 2 together, so I'm going to blend together here this guy from up here. You'll see what we get there. That's kind of nice. And that eventually, let's follow that up here. All the way up, you go into there. So that takes us from this to this. We just have a nice little gradation on everything. Very nice. Okay. So one other thing that we did here was from this shape, I brought this up into a shape stroke grayscale, pardon me. And what this does is I actually did a minus 0.19. So that gives us kind of an interior edge, almost like an edge detect, but interior. And then I'm going to blur that. So if I drop this out, you can see we're going to blur this with an intensity of 5. And when I blend these 2 together, this color here is just black. When I blend these 2 together with a multiply opacity of 0.26, just gives the very edges of the page just a sense of that wear and tear and a little bit of kind of a crispness to it, almost like it was, I don't know, set on something and you got the edges kind of real dirty. So that worked out real nice. Okay. So that's all for all that. So let's talk about our surface imperfections. And this is, if I zoom in a bit here, you can see there's these little marks on the page. There's all kinds of little just dots and marks and things. So in order to create that, this is how we went about doing that. So we start with a, what is this? This is a blue noise fast, and I really like this node, and I don't think a lot of people use it, and you really should. So we're going to throw that through a blur high quality grayscale with an intensity of 1.35 and always quality of 1. And this is what we get. So it's very Perlin-like, and it gives us a nice little fuzz. I think I use this for a carpet as well. It's really great. Throw this into a levels, and I'm going to severely clamp this and then move down the brightness. I wanted to get this real dark. Okay, so let's put him on hold. We'll come back to him. We're going to blend him with some other stuff here. So come over here to black and white spots 3. This is another great node. You can get real close to it and blur it, or real far back. This is good for nebulas, for all kinds of things. And if you throw it through a histogram scan of a 0.14, contrast of 0, you get these really nice isolated little randomized clumps of things that are perfect for imperfections, little smudges, that kind of thing. So let's throw that through a blur, intensity of 0.14, throw that back through a levels, and I'm going to clamp that up a whole bunch. So what we're going to do here is we're going to actually blend this and this, but the levels I cramped in order to use as the mask. So now this is what you get, and this is really cool. We get that multiple layers of things going on here. Okay, one more. Fractal Sum Base, another one of my favorite nodes. Absolutely no changes to it here. Max level is at 11. I think that's default. I'm not sure, but that's the only one that's different. Everything else is at the 1. Throw that guy into a levels, and again, clamp him a little bit, kind of get some more mid-range values out of that. And by blending these two together with a copy of 0.5, now I'm getting that on top of my imperfections on top of that, and now I have 3 layers of this, and there's just so many great little spots in here that are, well, spots, but there's great little locations of this that really give you some detailed breakup, and it's all tiling still, but it doesn't look procedural. It looks more realistic. So that's perfect. So that guy comes all the way up here, and this guy is actually the basis for our leather, cloth, whatever it is. So I threw that into a gradient map. And a gradient map, then I open up the gradient editor, and I found a picture online of one of these maps, one of my references, and you just do this click gradient, and what you want to do is I start with a light color. I can try to go light to mid to dark, and then back to mid and back to light again. Okay, and then I just kind of dragged a little snaky thing, and it gave me all of these. Now, you can simplify this. You can change this up. I was fine with this. I thought, cool, that looks great. Thank you. And it gives you this nice variation kind of automatically, and it's great. So there you go. So that's our base, our surface imperfections, which then bleed right into our base color. So now our base color here is essentially just adding every element that we create as we go along. So we're not going to worry too much about that right now, but we'll come back to it. Okay, so let's talk about the fold next. The fold is the big thing. This is the big thing that I learned a lot about, and I was trying to figure out how to do this. So I did literally take a piece of paper next to me here, the printer right next to me here, you can hear it. I took a piece of paper out and I folded it into that tri-fold. So we have one fold along here, a fold here, and a fold here. And when I had the piece of paper sitting next to me, I noticed I counted the ups and downs for the way that the ridges form, and I marked them so then I could go back here into the computer and say, how would I create that? How would I do that? So this is what I came up with. So we do a polygon 2, and this I'm going to set as the 4-sided, so it's a square technically with this kind of point to it. Scaled it in a little bit, and 0.71, and the rotation I did 45 degrees. So now I have this sort of diamond-like shape, okay? I'm going to throw that through a transform. What I'm going to do here is I transformed and scaled it way out. I couldn't even tell you exactly what percentage, but this is what you're looking for. Scaled it way out, so now I have this very sharp highlight, and then it kind of fades off. And you can't really get this from the gradients too well, even with doing levels. So I said this is the way to do it. So a really sharp highlight, and then we gradate off. Then I'm going to transform that and kind of crunch it back in on itself. I wanted to make a thin little ridge here. So that's what we have going on right there. Then I'm going to blend this, max lighten. So this guy on top of a color here, not quite white. 235, so not quite white. All right. And that gives us this. So you can see here I have, might be difficult to see on the video, but there's a really white spot here, and then it kind of gradients off very quickly and kind of blends in with the background a little bit. And it does have a little bit of a shadow kind of effect here. That's kind of a bonus because this is a physical thing. You know, it's a crease. So that worked out really nicely. Okay, so in order to do that, then we have that guy, and over here I just kind of threw him into a a blend node. I was having trouble with sometimes when you go right from here into a transform, sometimes it doesn't work for me, so I just have to throw it into a blend and that sort of resets it. So that's that weird gap there for you. Okay. So these are what I called my ups. So this is an up, and now I needed a down, okay? So I have invert grayscale, of course, and that gives us white to kind of going into this crevice, which is cool, but that's pretty extreme here. So we're going to throw this into a blend, and this, you can see here, we're blending with that white again, all right? And this is on a soft light, and this gave me a lot better. This is very harsh, and that crevice is very, very wide, and this gave me a lot better of a quick gradation off, and I feel like that crevice is smaller, and it's a lot better. So then I'm going to transform this, and I'm going to scale it in a little bit. See, scale it in there. And then, this is a little hard to follow sometimes, but here you go. So then I'm going to throw that into a levels, and I'm trying to match so that these two end up matching a bit better. This area here and this area here, but keep my crevice in place. So you can see here I kind of cramped up the dark values a bit, so it's a lot of light values. And then here, by blending that with our white color again, right there, let's settle these again. There you go. Multiply all the way to 1. Now I have what I'm looking for. I have this color, and we reach a point where it just says, I feel like dropping off into a little bit of a ditch. Perfect. Now to get that to work, I had to do a little bit of magic down here. So this guy is a color to mask, and I'm masking out just this inner part by masking this color out, okay? And I'm going to invert that so then I get just that center part. So what I'm taking is I'm blending that background color, and I'm just taking from right here to right here. So I'm just taking my crevice and blending that in with the color of the background. So that's how I ended up isolating it. And this is perfect. It goes all the way across the page. So there we go. So now we have our two sets over here. And you can see here from here I use, this is an upper and this is a down. So we have ups and downs. And then I had to look at the piece of paper and figure out which ones are ups, which ones are downs. And I think if I remember correctly, it's, you have these 3 rows here. So it's down, down, up, down, down, up, and then it's up and then down. Okay, and you can see it too with a piece of paper. If you fold a piece of paper for yourself, it'll become quite clear. So here we're going to transform, and we're going to move our up over here, and then I'm going to isolate just that top part of the up by moving my bottom here to 0.51. Okay, so it's a little less or a little more than halfway because I want a little bit of an overlap so that they blend together nicely. So then here I'm taking from our down, again, same movement, which is negative 0.25, by the way, if you're following along, negative 0.25 will get you right there. And then here I'm going to do 0.49. Notice it's not 0.5, 0.49 again, with just a little bit of an overlap. Then I'm going to blend the two together with max lighten. And you can see here they meet right at this perfect edge. So this guy's going up, this guy's going down. But that perfect edge obviously isn't going to work for us, so we're going to have to kind of have a blender piece. Hence our blender piece right here. So if we look at the result, you'll see here it kind of blends a little bit, and it has a nice these little corners here, which tend to look like when you fold a piece of paper right to a corner and you try and flatten it out again, it almost creates this kind of mountain peak kind of look from the top. So that is perfect. So this guy is just our first shape again. Okay, this shape here that we made, just transformed, scaled down, and put in place, and then blended, max lighten 0.76. And he kind of covers that gap quite nicely. Okay, we actually don't need this. So there he is, and we're going to blend him in place. Perfect. Turn that into a normal map, and it gets a little grainy here, intensity of 2. So then I'm going to do a transform, and I move that up just a little bit. I was trying to line it up later, so that's just a quick correction, pardon me, 0.01 on the transform there. And then we're going to do a blur high quality. So again, 1 and 1 for this. So if we look at this guy, he's blended quite nicely. Again, this might be difficult to see on the video. I apologize, but if you follow along, it'll make perfect sense. Okay, so we're going to combine this with, here you can see we do our across. Okay, so let's do our across. So again, we're going back to our up and downs. Quite simple. We're going to just use our up here right in the center. Okay, we're not going to move them at all. But again, we're going to do a 0.51 from the bottom on the cropping so that we get a little more than half, and blend it with a down that is blended 0.49 from the bottom, from the top, pardon me. So when you blend the two together, we get the same kind of thing as over here, but over here. In hindsight, what I could have done is just do one and then move it around, you know, but there you go. You learn as you do. So we're going to blend these together and then blend one of our blender pieces on top. There you go. And then here, I'm doing some smart work here. We're going to take this and I'm going to rotate it, put him in place, and I'm going to take this and move him over. So I do end up eventually reusing instead of rebuilding every time. So here we're going to turn this into a normal map again. 2, blur high quality grayscale. I'm sorry, blur high quality 1 and 1. There you go. And then this guy's all set, and we're just going to do him and do a blur again. Then this guy, we're going to come all the way from over here. This is going to be our, he's all downs in that center crease, because as the first fold is to fold the paper totally in half along this edge. So that first fold, all we have to do is just turn him into a 2, blur. I'm going to start combining these. So I'm combining those two. Normal, combine these two. Combine these two together. And now I have, again, a little hard to see, but there's 3 lines. One there, one there, one there, and one across. And they all have their proper ups and downs. And there you go. You have all of your folds all set up. Now these will go over into our normals. So here we're going to take this guy and we're going to turn him into a height, normal to height. You can see this a little bit better now. So see, up, 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 down, 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 down. That's how it ends up with a piece of paper folded. So then we're going to blend that with our imperfections. So if you see from way over here, our imperfections. Okay, and this is a copy 0.57, and this is perfect because now we have our ups and downs, and we have some imperfections in there, and that's exactly what should go into a height. But we're going to do some more with the height in just a second. But then this goes into our AO, which is very difficult to see because it's a lot of white. But an AO, and I always tend to blur it just a little bit at the end, and that's our AO. So essentially, a very whited out version of that. So then up here, we put this into a normal again. There we go. So this is a height to normal world units, and we'll put the surface all the way up to 1,000, the height depth 13.04, and make sure you change your sampling to Sobel. That will really help with the fine detail in there. Okay. Then we're going to combine that with our normal with this normal again. Okay, just for a little bit of reinforcement almost of that shape. There you go. So that gives us a really nice normal map, and I should probably move that over just a little bit. And that will give us all of our creases with the imperfections. Very good. Okay. So while we're here, let's talk about some of the rest of these. So over here, we take our final, actually it comes from, this one comes from here because this is our final map here. And I'll throw that into the Grayscale Conversion. Actually, he's coming from way earlier. There you go. Back here, before we have all the stuff on the map, all of the ink, because it doesn't really matter. So just from here, once everything's done to the map that's not going to be ink, like that, we're going to throw it into a Grayscale Conversion. And this guy is going to power quite a bit over here. So throw him into a levels and adjust to taste, and that's going to become your roughness. So I wanted it to be very, very rough, a little darker. It is kind of, you know, if it is leather, it's got a little bit of oil and such in it. And you could even do a layer for the ink if you really wanted to. Then levels here and really darken them up, and this is our metallic. It technically should be totally black. It's not metal at all. But I like to add just a little bit so that you get a few highlights here and there as it's moving, just some interesting light play. But again, you could totally replace this with a black thing if you really wanted to. Okay. Of course, our opacity. We have an opacity map to make sure we cut out the rest. And that's just coming right from our shape over here as we already finished. Very good. Okay, so now we have a little bit more ink to cover, and then we'll come back to this. So let's cover our ink, and yeah. So the rivers I'm not totally happy with, but it was a good experimentation, trying to create some lines that can connect to the oceans and come inward, and then you want them to branch as well, and that's the difficult part. So that's why I call this experimental. I wouldn't call this a finished product at all. Okay, so our cells 2 here. This is a size of 16, disorder of 0.3. And yeah, that's all we have there. So then we're going to warp this. 1.16, I'm warping from a blurred copy of this guy, which is a levels that we took from our gradient map here that we created earlier. And I'm just going to take that and blur that and use that to kind of mix it up a bit. Then I'm going to warp that, and I'm going to power that by a transform of this guy. So I'm going to take that and transform and kind of scale him this way a bit more. Going to get some more interesting shapes out of him. So just kind of trying to mess it up. All right, so let's blend this together. So I'm going to blend this, and the opacity from this is going to come all the way from over here from our final land shape. Obviously, we can only have rivers where there's land, right? So there they are. So this looks more like a country map at the moment, you know, the border lines between countries. So I'm going to blur this just a little bit, just a very little bit. Actually, I think I turned it off entirely. So you can kind of skip this guy. Then we're going to blend with another mask. And the reason I'm doing this is trying to get rid of all of the rivers and just get a few rivers, okay? So we're going to blend this, and all this is just right into the blend, and then our mask is a transform 2D from back in our continent days, back here where we were creating continents. So I took one of these and said, hey, let's just move it around, scale it around a bit, try to isolate some areas where there would be some rivers. Then I'm going to do a directional warp of that with this crease, and this is default. I just drag this in, the crease. Directional warp of 30.86 and 108 degrees, just trying to create some more windiness to it. Okay, transform it again, scale it up, move it around, try to just fill out some space, and once again blend it with that original mask so that we make sure that we only have rivers over top of our land. And this is what I kind of ended up with, just a few rivers coming through here. Again, they're experimental. I don't think they're very good yet, but I threw them in there, so they get added at the very end. Okay, so let's talk about we're right here, our map locations. So I named this land Algorithmia. There you go. Algorithmia. Just came up with something, you know. Algorithmic, thank you so much for your amazing software. So just threw in some text node here, give it a name, font size down, and this is Blackadder ITC. That's a font that I happen to have on my computer. Transform to move it around, put it in place, and then blend it on top of the map. 0.5 on the opacity, and the color here is our color that we've chosen for our ink, which is this color, 65, 34, and 255. So that just kind of gets thrown on there. There you go. And you could put all kinds of those all over the map, but this is not quite fully procedural because this is, you know, a hand kind of thing, but you could go in here and change the name of the city or the land, and it would replace it right here with the transform. So kind of procedural. There you go. All right, we've got two more. Let's talk about the compass rose, and then we'll talk about the mountains because those took a lot of work. So the compass rose here, very similar. We're going to take a shape node, and this is using the ridged bell scale of 0.56. And I'm going to blend it with a version of itself transformed and rotated 90 degrees, blended on a max lighten. Levels that guy up, drag this all the way over here, trying to just shrink and get this star kind of effect. Transform, bring that shape up now that the pixels are settled. And then we're going to color to mask and choose just the white in the middle. And now we're really starting to isolate that center part. Again, scale them back up and then levels them out. There we go. Now, gradient linear 2. And here's a neat trick. You need a quick ring. Throw it through a shape mapper node. Shape mapper, we're going to set circle, pattern of 1. And then the radius and width here depends on the size of the circle that you want. But you got an instant ring. So I have 0.43 and 0.004. Then I threw it through a levels and clamped everything down so that I made a nice mask out of that. Blend the two together on add linear dodge. Now down here we're going to create some additional shapes. So cube 3D, throw that into a shape mapper again. Circle 4 on the pattern, but the radius is negative 0.39. And that gives me this. So then I'm going to levels that out and clamp that out. Another shape mapper for negative 0.01, so just barely in the negative. Levels and clamp that out. This guy is isolating that, so I'm taking a shape node of the square, scale of 0.71, rotation 45 degrees to make a nice diamond shape here, and I'm going to move it up, and I'm going to turn off the tiling, move it up 0.47. Use that as the mask to isolate just this one. Transform and scale it real skinny. separate transform to rotate it around and scale it down so that I can always go back and determine exactly how skinny or fat I want this to be. Then here I'm going to blend it with itself rotated 90 degrees. So you get that. Blend it with itself rotated 180 degrees. And you get one there, one there. Put those together. Very nice. And then rotate it 45 degrees. Then up here, we're going to add everything together. So blend those two together. Add linear dodge. Blend these together. Add linear dodge. Pardon me. Then we're going to blend this guy and this guy together to get this. But I'm going to put this in an opacity of 0.3 and a max lighten. Just I wanted a little bit of variation that behind the compass rose here. There was some kind of a design that was not quite as thick and dark ink as the top. That's all. Then here we go. So we're going to choose a different font. Probably should choose the same font for both, but just put an N.25. Brickham Script Pro bold is my font. Put that above for our north heading. Blend the two together again. Add linear dodge. Transform 2D to scale it and move it around wherever you want it. So I just put it here in the ocean. So that's a compass rose. Now for the mountains. Final big thing to figure out how to do this. So I think they look really good, especially if you look up Lord of the Rings maps and that kind of thing. That was kind of my main inspiration. And I think that these turned out really, really well. So that's what they look like up close. Really cool. Okay, so let's jump into it. So for our mountains, we're going to take the same kind of thing here. 0.5 and 45 degree turn. And then I'm going to blend that with a copy of itself moved. Negative 0.12. That gives us this. Then this guy, again, we're cropping up 0.5 on the bottom. This is a really cool little chevron looking thing. So that's pretty cool. Now what we're going to do is we're going to blend, and I want to add some mass here. Don't worry about this. We're just adding mass in here. So this is a blended version of this guy transformed, and then I'm going to crop off at a certain point. So 0.51 on the right, 0.56 on the bottom. What that gives me is I'm cutting off here. I'm trying to make sure that I still remain flat on the bottom here. Then I'm going to warp this shape using a blurred version. First of all, sorry, the warp 1.94, blur of 10 version from way over here. We're copying this clouds too. Okay. And that gives us this, which is looking cool, but again, it's got a little tumor here we need to get rid of. So this guy, I'm going to go ahead and just do a blend, and I'm going to use this as my original opacity for that, so that cuts off that extra lump that we don't need. Now down here, I'm going to warp again. So I'm going to warp this result again by itself, 1.92. And I'm going to blend the two together with a min darken. And that kind of gives me my final mountain shape. So we get this nice little, that really stark relief style to show like a highlight from one side of the mountain and a shadow on the other. And then over here, this is the combinations that we went through. So each of these is a transform. We're moving it around and kind of getting different shaped mountains. And then I made these little bundles. Okay, so I'm going to blend with add linear dodge to create a couple little bundles, something like that. That's my first bundle. And then down here, I'm going to do a flatter one, a higher peak, some different sizes. And then let's blend, add linear dodge, some more bundles. And I'm trying to create almost a downward slant of this. So like this, down this way. So with these bundles in play, we're going to throw these into a splatter node. And this splatter node has the following: 100-100 rotation of negative 6.96, rotation variation 16.52. The zoom is in the 7500 range. Disorder 410. Grid number 5, disorder angle 68.7. Pattern size of 5, size variation 37.44. And that, and then I'll take another one here. And I think this one is very, very similar. I don't think we changed much at all for this guy, but what I may have done is change the random seed is up to a 4. So with the random seed at 4, and this guy is very similar, but the two are like that, then what we're going to do is we're going to use those, and now we're going to start to isolate those. So if you look over here, what we've got here is this is one of our patterns, And then the mask for that pattern is, let's see down here. I took one of our original islands and did a edge detect, and I did a pretty extreme edge detect, so 4.22, roundness of 16. Throw that into an invert grayscale. Throw that up into a transform, rotate them around, and then use that as the mask to isolate some of these mountains. Okay, and then transform to move those around a little bit. Then take the same one here, and I'm going to isolate a different group of mountains, and then transform to move that around, and then transform to move a second set around. And we're going to blend, add linear dodge, blend these two together, add linear dodge, blend these two together, and you see you're starting to get some really cool groups of mountains here. And then add linear dodge and throw some mountains down here. So you'll see that's all of our main mountains in here, and I threw some mountains down here on this little peninsula island thing. I just thought, a little bit of a mountain range right there. And so this is just a combination of, once you have these bundles, and you throw them through here to get a large slathering of them. Now we just have to isolate them somehow. So by borrowing from our previous islands, doing an edge detect to kind of really round off that shape, I wanted to fill in the shape because you can't have a mountain kind of halfway in one of these things. So I said, you know what, just blow it out. Give me just a blob. And that helped to kind of isolate some of these things. And then by combining them all together, we get some mountain ranges. And they look so good. I mean, it came out really nice. So, and they're not perfect. See, this one's getting cut off, but you know, hey, it's procedural mountains. So there you go. Okay, so that's all of the main things, and then we just walk the chain here. So as we start to put things together, we have our gradient map, and then over here, we're going to start to put some variation down. This is a 0.25 multiply, and what we're multiplying here is we're putting this, let's see, yep. So we're doing a levels off of this guy to kind of create some variation. Just throw a little extra variation in there. Then we have our outer gradient thing, and we have our edges being dirtied up. We have our initial lines being added in. We have our coastline level 1, coastline level 2. And then here, this was a pretty simple one, but this is just the an invert grayscale of the oceans, and I just made the oceans a little darker, so 0.15 on a multiply. But it really helps it pop. It really makes it look so much better, just that simple effect. And that was a suggestion from my wife as I was working on that. She's like, why don't you make the oceans darker? I said, okay, that sounds good. Throw the mountains in there. There we go. They look so good. And then throw our compass rose. Let's throw our rivers on there. And then the very last one here is our map locations. Let's name our land. And then throw that into our final output. So there we go. Okay, one last thing we forgot to talk about was this. And this is pretty simple, but also very cool. So back over here, we need to make a proper height map for our page to make it go up and down along with our ridges, right? Along with our creases. So over here, let's take a look. So we're going to take this guy and I'm going to stretch him out real far. So you have a white outline here and then a very dark gray, but not super dark at the edges. Transform, and I'm moving this on a 0.5 on the X so that I have one ridge here, and a center. So it goes up, down, up, down. Okay, that's the important part. And then here, I'm going to move it 0.25, so now it goes down, up, down, up. Notice the difference there. So now over here, I'm going to isolate this top corner, and then I'm going to rotate by 180 degrees and blend it with itself. So it now goes from center, up, down, and from here, up, down. All right? I'm going to do the inverse here. So I'm going to take this guy, do this corner, rotate 180 degrees, and combine. So now he goes down, up, which will connect perfectly with our up, down. And when you blend these two together, you get this. So we're going down, up, and then this is up, down, down, up. Then we're going to blur this, blur high quality grayscale 1 and 10. Okay, and so you get these very Amebis looking things. It doesn't even look really good here. But when you throw it into the height map, it's giving us exactly what we want. Right along those creases, we're going up or down, and you can totally affect how much. And that just worked out really nice. So we're going to blend this with this. And here you can even affect how much. So I could kind of come down a little bit with this. And you can see more of our rigid. You can see it line up right where they should. And our page is looking really good. So there you go. that's it. That's a ton going on. I know it's a long episode. I apologize. It's going to take forever to upload. But I wanted to make sure you guys had a full walkthrough of how all this works. And yes, I will put this up on the website a little bit later on and make sure that you guys can access it as well. And you can take a look directly at this. You will need Designer 2017.2.1 in order to do all of this, in order to load this file even. And this is in 4K resolution right now. So you can look at the page from all different angles. And I'll put out some finalized images of it too, so you can see it up close, do some high res and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, have fun making your own custom maps and send me anything cool that you create. I'm always excited to see what users create. Thank you again very much for your kind time and attention. If you have any questions, please let me know. And until next time, guys, keep practicing, get better, and I'll see you next time as the pilgrimage continues.